go ahead. Perfect. So for the ethical scenario portion of the exam, just to reiterate, you'll get the signed version of the ethical dilemma. What should the interpreter do? Your options of which one you would select, pick all that apply, and pick ideal situations. If you think that you have plenty of deaf interpreters available, you could literally pick up the phone and call, and they would have them send one over. So just think of it in that kind of fashion and form. Once you go through step one, so there's going to be 8 total case studies, and it's basically unfolding. So you walk into a doctor's appointment, this happens, what do you do? Great, you answer. Next, you're still at that doctor's appointment. Now something else came up. What do you do? So that's that point of that unfolding scenario. Once you select your answer here, you will not be able to go and change this answer. You can go back and watch the video, but you can't change your answer of what you should do. What I have kind of heard, I don't know how accurate it is that you might select what you think you would do, and the test may, depending on what you answer, will then bring you to a different scenario. Or I've also heard where it could be the test may be kind of tricking you of thinking, oh, I didn't select it, ask for, or I selected ask for a team of deaf interpreters, but that wasn't the answer. Wait a minute, what? And so they'll kind of throw you off. So they might end up, here's your answers is 1, 2, and 6. They might say, okay, you asked for a deaf interpreter. Deaf interpreter showed up. And you're probably thinking during the test, wait a minute, I got that one wrong because I didn't select ask for a team of deaf interpreters. So just don't get set in your mind of, I got that one wrong because that's not what I selected. They might trick you and say, okay, that might not have been what you selected, but another interpreter may have, and it may not be the quote unquote ethical or the right decision for that scenario, but they're going to just try to trick you. Okay, you did request for a team of a deaf interpreter. Now what do you do now that this happens? So don't get stuck on, I got that one wrong, I'm done. You answered it, move on, next question. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, you go in to take your knowledge test, you sit down and take the fundamentals of interpreting exam, you get up, you take a 20-minute break, you come back and you take the ethics and cultural responsiveness exam. Then, right now they are finalizing the beta exams for the knowledge test. So that means that when you all sign up for your test, you will hopefully have results instantaneously. So then that way you don't have to wait a year like our lovely interpreters who have been taking the knowledge test over the last year. They have been anxiously waiting. So keep that in mind. This will become a smoother process of you sign up, you go in and you get your results there. Then you pass your knowledge exam completely of both exams. Then you're eligible, and we'll go into full eligibility, but one of the requirements is to pass the knowledge to become eligible for the performance exam. That's the interpreting skills. And that's the, obviously the hearing interpreting one versus the deaf interpreter one. This is the one exam that is different. So for example, if Tanya were to go in and take her knowledge exam, she's going to take the same knowledge exam as you. When you go in and take your performance exam, you're going to take a hearing one, and Tanya will take a deaf interpreter exam because our roles, not necessarily roles, but our skills are different in how we function as interpreters, as a deaf and a hearing interpreter. So really, that's going to include a few different things, and I don't have a sample of that yet because Casley hasn't posted it on their website, but I will go into more details of that, what that looks like. Joelle?
Yeah, I have a question. So say you pass the knowledge exam, both parts of that, and then you fail the performance exam. Is there like a way to go about, like, since you've passed the knowledge exam, that's done, so you can wait like 2 years and take the performance exam again, and that still is passed. You don't have to retake that after a certain amount of time.
So I'm going to just go to this next one here because this is going to have kind of a layout here for you. So
Okay.
you have your ethics and knowledge exam, which is all part of the knowledge exam. So that's the two that we talked about that you take the same day. If you pass the knowledge portion and fail the ethics portion, you are not able to advance to take the performance until you pass the ethics. You don't have to retake the knowledge. You passed it, you're done. Ethics, I fail, I take it again until I pass, and vice versa with the knowledge. Both are the same concept. Once I've passed both, I now have a 5-year ticker. I have 5 years to pass my performance exam. The performance exam, you can take as many times as you want in 5 years. However, you have a 6-month waiting period. So for my lovely story of 5 times, took it in 2015, failed. I had to wait at least 6 months before I could take it again, but I didn't start taking it until 2017. And then I took it in 2017, 2019, 2020, and 2021. So I had years in between some of mine, but my minimum requirement to wait was 6 months. If you take, going back over to the ethics and the knowledge portion, if you take and pass or fail one of these, you have to wait 3 months before you can take it again. And then once you pass the knowledge exam for both tests, you pass the performance exam, you're now on your way to, you've obtained your NIC or your National Interpreter Certification. So even though the test itself has changed, the outcome of our certification is NIC still. So if you think of, I'm assuming Tanya and Krista have talked about knowing what is a CSC, CICT, ICTC, all of those other past certifications that you probably read in, no? I want to say it's in So You Want to Be an Interpreter book.
She's talking to you guys. They're going to respond. Do you guys learn about those in interpreting old certificates? CICT.
I think we read about them because we read the So You Want to Be an Interpreter book.
NAD3,
Probably.
level 4, level 5, NIC Master, Advanced, regular NIC, the long list of alphabet behind people's names. Yeah, okay. So those were all different exams, and so they would change your outcome or your certification name that you get when you pass those tests. But even though our test changed, the outcome is still an NIC. So when you guys, so my process to certification looked a little bit different. I got my NIC. When you all complete and pass your test, you will also have an NIC. That will be your kind of that title, like how at the beginning of my slide it said Krista Anderson, comma NIC. It'd be like saying Krista Anderson, comma PhD, or I think I've seen some like Ed 12s and stuff like that. So that's that concept of what your certification would look like. For example, Tanya, though, when she goes to pursue her certification, hers will be CDI, will be her credentials, not an NIC, because NIC is for hearing interpreters, CDI is for deaf interpreters. Joelle, did that answer your question? Awesome. The next slide I'm going to go into is eligibility and more details of what each exam will entail. Are there any other questions before I go to that slide? Oh, okay. So for the fundamentals of interpreting exam, to know if you're eligible, because that's important. I don't want you all to get excited and go sign up and you're not eligible. To be eligible, you have to be over 18 years old. Is everybody over 18 here? Do I have any geniuses who are like 14? No? Okay. One day I'll meet a genius that's 14 and instead of jumping ahead in classes, but I'm sure you are all still geniuses. Have an RID account, which you would sign up with RID. And now I should clarify, does everybody know the difference between RID and CASLI? No, okay. RID is Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, and that's kind of the umbrella. So what happened is the body of interpreters under RID, our national level, recognized that there was a problem with our test and the system because we were only at a 27% pass rate. Luckily, we're at 32% pass rate now. But that they had recognized there was a problem with that. So with the 27% pass rate, they said, hold on, we need to fix this. And so here came CASLI, born under RID. It's a separate organization, but it is under the RID umbrella. So RID makes the rules, like the eligibility rules, your certification name, NIC. If RID wanted to say, okay, in order to interpret it in healthcare setting, you have to have a specialized certificate in something, RID makes those rules. CASLI, their sole purpose is to develop the exam and evaluate it. That's their role. So when you hear RID and CASLI, that's what you'll see. So you'll need an RID account, which is our main umbrella. And you cannot currently hold any certification. So for example, I can't go and take the test. Say, for example, Beth, I'm going to use you as an example. I don't know Beth, so I don't know her certification, but say she has NAD3 or CICT, or maybe she only has her TC. She is not eligible, TC. She is not eligible to take the knowledge exam. To become eligible, and say Krista's just super eager and wants to take another test because clearly she has a great history in taking tests, I would have to let my certification completely lapse, which means I don't keep up on my continuing education credits, which is required to have 80 hours in 5 years. If I don't keep up on that, I get my certification revoked and I have to go back and start again and take my knowledge exam. That's the only way I would be eligible to ever take the knowledge exam. I would love to take it, but I don't think I have enough confidence to let my certification lapse to go back to take it. So that's how you know that you're eligible. Once you determine that you're eligible, you sign up for the test and you go in, and here's what you can expect. You're going to have 120 multiple choice questions. It will be half in ASL and half in written English. And again, I will email this PowerPoint out to Tanya and Krista. So if you want to take notes, you definitely can. And then the exam assesses interpreters on the practical knowledge to competently perform as an ASL interpreter in typical settings. So I'm going to just emphasize typical. So just assume that your consumer probably is your average deaf individual. It may have some deaf-blind questions on there, but I don't foresee it having anything like strong mental health. Like the deaf consumer looked off to the side and looked like they were having a conversation with another person. That's more mental health specialty. This is going to be an average typical setting. Might have some healthcare things on there, like the example showed of the consumer was pregnant or whatever. It will have some of those, but nothing too specialized. So that's the fundamentals of an interpreting exam. Any questions on that exam? Nope. Okay. You go in, you take it, you get your 20-minute break, and now you sit down and take the ethics and cultural responsiveness exam. Oh, and the exam duration of this is up to 3 hours. So if you're pretty quick pace and you get done in an hour and a half, great, but you have up to 3 hours to take it. For the ethics, again, the same requirements as the fundamentals of interpreting, over 18, RD account, and not currently certified. The questions, there are a total 8 case studies. Each one will have 3 to 4 unfolding scenarios. So here's a situation happened. You go into a doctor's appointment and now something happened. You answer that question, then the next thing happens. You're still at the doctor's appointment, you're still with that deaf consumer, something else came up. How this happens. You answer that, still there, something else happens. So that's what that unfolding scenarios means. So there'll be 8 studies, but each one will have 3 to 4 built off of it that you'll answer. Again, it will be in bilingual, half presented in ASL, half in English, and it's multiple choice. Before, I don't know if you guys have heard about the old exam, the one I took for ethics, I signed my response. I don't know if you have maybe prepared for that ever at all, but I signed my response. Here's a scenario that happened. The interpreter did this. They told me what the interpreter did, and I support their decision using the CPC, and I sign it. That was the one that I took. You no longer do that. You don't sign on these. You just answer multiple choice of which should the interpreter do. And make sure to select all that apply, because I've heard horror stories of them saying, it didn't say select all that applied. I didn't know I was supposed to check more than one. So check, if it lets you check more than one, check more than one. And then exam assessment, you will be measured on being able to demonstrate awareness of cross-cultural communication, cultural and systemic oppression, and personal cultural competence. So being aware of working with a deaf-blind individual or a Black deaf individual would be different of how I interact with a white individual, or maybe they're 72 and they have arthritis. I might have more of a challenge with my receptive skills than maybe my 30-year-old or 40-year-old who doesn't have arthritis. So being aware of different cultural and systemic oppressions will be important for that as well. In this exam, you have up to 90 minutes. Again, it's multiple choice. So if you finish in an hour, great, but you have up to 90 minutes to complete this exam. Any questions on this part of the exam? Nope. Okay. So once each one of you lovely individuals pass both of these first time around, get your results immediately. You jump up and down, you text Krista and say, hey, I passed, woohoo. Then you can go ahead and when you feel ready, because these tests are not cheap, then you can sign up for the performance exam. In order to be eligible for the performance exam, you have to have passed both tests of the knowledge. You have to have a bachelor's degree or an alternative pathway. And Tanya, as deaf interpreters, as of this June, you are also required to have a bachelor's degree for deaf interpreters. Previously, it didn't require that. Now it does. So this still applies for deaf interpreters as well. So if you were to be like, great, I passed my test, it's April, I want to sign up for the performance test, you got to wait till you get that bachelor's degree and transcript, submit it to RID for their approval, and then you can go and take your test. And the alternative pathway, you don't necessarily need to worry about it because I believe you're all getting a bachelor's with Augustana, but just be aware some people who don't have bachelor's degrees, if they have, say, been interpreting for 15 years full time and have gone to workshops, they can tally up their hours to equal the 120 credits in order to equal a bachelor's degree. So that's that alternative pathway option. And again, you can't hold current certification, so I wouldn't be able to go and take the test, even though I feel like it'd be a lot less stressful knowing that I have a certification to go in and see what's about. But unfortunately, once you have certification, you're not able to go back because the end result again is still an NIC. I don't get an advanced or master by taking this. So I am no longer eligible. This exam has 6 vignettes, and it will consist of consecutive interpreting. So that is, I absolutely love consecutive interpreting in healthcare settings. Just saying, it's my new best friend. That example is the doctor goes into the room and say, "Hi, what brings you in today?" It gives me a minute to say, "Okay, like, why are you here? Hello." I interpret. Deaf person says, "Oh my goodness, I was 2 years old and this happened, blah, blah, blah. And then I was 10, and then when I was 15, it's still going on. And oh, I have this tingling in my feet," and goes on and on and on. I'm like, "Yep, point, got it. Great, I'm here today because I have tingling in my feet. So I just got this whole story, point, great. This is the reason what brings me in." So I have that cultural mediation piece. That's consecutive. Simultaneous is what Beth is doing now. While I'm talking and presenting, she's signing at the same time. And those both will be in ASL to English, English to ASL. Sight translation. So this is not something that has been on, at least in my knowledge, of any of the previous RID exams. They have it on what's called the BEI, which is the Texas exam. But the sight translation of maybe like the patient bill of rights of you as a patient have these rights. It's just like a frozen text that you read through. It could be maybe a story, like if you interpret in educational settings, the teacher might say, "Okay, let's go ahead and have you read this paragraph and then tell me what you thought about it." And maybe one of the choices of the interpreter is, "Okay, I'll read it and I'll sign it to you in ASL." Maybe that's their choice, instead of saying, "Oh, hi teacher, do you mind reading it and I'll interpret it?" So that sight translation piece is seeing it, reading it from English, and then now interpreting it into ASL. And or any combination. So that could also be anytime that we're having a conversation. So if I ask Tanya, "How you're doing today?" She replies to me, Beth interprets into English, I get the answer, and then we go back and forth. That could be that oh my goodness, that consultative, interactive interpreting. The exam assesses interpreters to be able to demonstrate the ability to perform the required tasks of an ASL interpreter. Again, a hearing interpreter. So that's what we as hearing interpreters do in our daily work. So they want to make sure that you have that skills and knowledge to do that. And that exam is 90 minutes. And you have 5 to 20 minutes per stimulus. So with that being said, the performance test that I took is, here's a quick 4-minute clip, maybe 3 minutes. Here's what it is, interpret it and go down. And now that's my little elevator spiel. Okay, great. Watch 4 minutes of my work. I hope it was good enough. You all now have the opportunity that we did not have, or depending when you took the test, your deaf consumer pops up, they sign to you beautifully, you say, "Great, this is what they look like, here's their language, they're giving a presentation on this today, here's my hearing person, sounds like they have a little bit of a Southern accent. Okay, get used to the sound and what they sound like." And then you get this long description, any images of what you can encounter on the exam, maybe some names, some numbers, some alphabet soup, whatever it may be, a recipe, I have no idea, but something up there for, like, you get 5 minutes of prep time. My experience was I get 1 minute of prep time and it's like 2 paragraphs. Based off of what I've seen from the deaf interpreter sample exam, you get 5 minutes and you get this whole long page of videos, content, prep materials to get that information and get in that mindset. Okay, this is what they're talking about. Great. Now the screen pulls up. You're going to do maybe simultaneous interpreting and you're going to interpret it. And that could go maybe for 5 to 15 minutes versus 4 minutes. So you're going to make sure you want to have that longer stamina to interpret instead of maybe your 5 or 10 minute stint that you're currently at. So you want to make sure to build that. Any questions on the hearing interpreter performance exam? Aaliyah.
My question is, I'm sorry, I didn't think of it before, but if you fail one part of the knowledge exam, you said you can just retake that one part, right?
Yes.
But then, when you go to retake that one part, do you still pay to retake the whole test, or is there like separate like payment thing for that?
So let me see if I can find it. I literally just took a picture of this because I was doing some research and I was like, holy bonkers. I didn't realize how much the registration fees went up. Let me pull up. I'm going to find Casley's website. So you would have to repay every time you take a test, is the short, quick answer. But I do want to show you like how much these exams cost, because I want you to be aware of that. Also, with that being said, while I look for this, think of kind of where you're going to want to move and live. And some states, aka Minnesota, have scholarships available through our RID chapter. So I was fortunate enough before I was on the board, I applied for these scholarships and I got one for mentoring, so I could pay for a mentor to prepare for the test. And I also got one to pay for the exam, which was actually the final time that I took it. And so being able to not think about, okay, how am I going to come up with $450 to pay for this test the 5th time, was a huge relief because I could actually focus on preparing for the test. So know what scholarships are available and or if any in your areas, because that is huge. They also do the scholarship for the knowledge exam as well. We do it once a year, so we just announced, so usually we give them in October. So you'd have to wait another year to apply. But can you all see Casley's site here for exam registrations? Maybe if I zoom in, I think that might help too. So deaf interpreters exams rates on here. So regular rate versus RID member. If you pay to become a member of RID, regardless if you're a student or associate, then you are under this rate to take the test. And then it depends if it's your first time or your retake. So for hearing interpreters, to take your knowledge exam the first time, if you're not a member, is $425. Before, it used to only be, I think, like $200. I could be off, but it wasn't 400. And the reason why is because that's that 2-part exam, remember? Versus when I took it, it was just one exam, but this is now the 2-part exam that you're taking. So then when you take, if you have to do a retake, depending on which one, then now you're at $375. And then the performance is even more than what I took it for. The first time is $510, the second time is $460. And then when you are a RID member, this is your discounted rate over here in this column. And then the rate looks like it's potentially going to be the same for the new performance exam, but be aware of these numbers. I mean, that's over $1,000 just in test taking. That's not including if you're becoming a member of RID. Again, I took it 5 times, so it definitely adds up. Try to have a plan in place to save for this and look for scholarships. Or if you're going to live in Kansas and Missouri and they don't have a scholarship system set up, reach out to their RID chapter and say, hey, I've heard some other states have scholarships that would help for this. Would that be something that our Kansas body of interpreters would be interested in doing to help us become certified? Be that voice in that body to make a change. And if you need help with that, definitely reach out to me. I have people here in Minnesota who are more than happy to have these conversations with other state RID chapters and saying, here's what we did. We just hosted workshops. That money was put aside. We saved for 5 years for 7 different workshops. So we are for 7 different scholarships. So with one workshop, we have 5 years worth of 7 scholarships ready and available. So be that voice and change, because I definitely see personally this is a need in our community, regardless if it's for the hearing or deaf interpreters in taking the tests. So any other questions on the exams? Because then we're going to move into the questionnaire of which settings you would be interested in working, as well as the state requirements. Tanya, I have till 9:50, right? Okay. So lastly, the other thing is sign up for a Casly.app account as soon as you can. Once you know that you want to take the test, it's a great website. It has the sample exams in there. These links that I showed you here, this is the answer page, but they actually have the platform and the layout of what the test will look like. So get familiar with that, because to me, that was one thing where it's like, I don't know what to expect. It lays it out for you for these expectations. So I want to go through the questionnaire results. I had 5 of you complete it, so we're going to go through that. And I asked which interpreting setting that you are most interested in working in upon graduating. 4 out of 5 of you are interested in interpreting in K-12 educational settings. So towards the end here, we'll go into what are the laws for the states that you have provided me with to work in these settings, so that way you know. And thinking, okay, as a newly graduated interpreter, what does my language look like? Because you may also become the language model for these deaf individuals. And hopefully they have a deaf and hard of hearing teacher assigned to them. Some here in Minnesota, I know the deaf and hard of hearing teacher are hearing. So now they have 2 hearing models, but things to consider of how you're impacting our kiddos in their education and development and their language, and what does that look like? So that's the reason why I kind of want to have these conversations with you all, because I wish people had these conversations with me before entering the field, and then maybe answer any questions you have. So we'll go on to the next one here. Like I said, if you have any questions, just raise your hand and I can help answer them if I can. The next one, 4 out of 5 of you are interested to interpret freelance in community settings. My world, I will interpret sports all day, but don't put me in a K-12 setting. I don't also want to be the person who wipes their nose or is in charge of anything else. I just want to show up, interpret, have a relationship and rapport with my consumer. That's just me. Hence, I don't have children. So knowing what are those areas in which you like to work. So freelance, again, can be healthcare settings, mental health. A lot of really any job can become a healthcare or mental health appointment at any time. Business meetings. I interpret AA. I don't know if they still have that in South Dakota for students. Awesome. They also have the ASL Big Book fully interpreted now, the 12 steps and traditions. So definitely use that as a resource. Sports settings. So that's the fun thing for me about freelance is there's not one day that's the same. I'm always working with different individuals, whether it is a deaf president of a company, or if it's a deaf individual who's going into the doctor's appointment. Their languages are so different, and seeing that exposure to sign language is definitely helpful, similar to the sense of like what VRS could be. 3 out of 5 of you are interested to interpret VRS. I think that would be a great thing. I don't know why, like when I was graduating, I'm like, yes, VRS all the way. And then I just got kind of scared of it because it was 2D. But one thing I feel, again, I don't know this because I haven't worked in the setting, but I feel like it's a good starting point for interpreters coming out of college, because you can, from what I hear, you can like knock on your table and a team will appear. What? Like, how cool is that versus in the freelance world, if I knock on the table, I get stares. So knowing kind of what what those support systems are in place. So I feel like VRS could be a good option for that and kind of those shadowing opportunities. But again, that's what I've heard of. I haven't personally been in the VRS setting. Also is really good in preparing for any performance exams. 2D interpreting is completely different than real life interpreting. 1 out of 5 of you are interested in interpreting performance settings. So these are concerts and plays and yeah, theatricals and arts. And I do some of this. I've done some concerts, some big named concerts at the Xcel Energy Center here. I know in St. Cloud here in Minnesota, which is about 40-ish minutes from where I live. They have, in the summer, they have outdoor concerts every Wednesday and Thursday that they hire interpreters for. So there's, I think, like 5 or 6 of us who interpret those concerts. So definitely, I know that the performance settings is a thing here. There's the Guthrie. In Sioux Falls, I know there's the Pavilion. I don't know if the Denny Sanford, they kind of put that up as I was leaving. So I don't know how much of that they do in the Sanford. I know they do concerts and stuff. So maybe there could be a potential for you to observe an interpreter during your internship. Something you could ask or pursue. The worst thing they could do is say no. And 0 of you are interested in VRI settings out of the 5, which I thought was hilarious. And I laugh because I don't know if it's the misunderstanding of VRI and what it has turned to. So back in the day, VRI was, let's roll in this iPad and to this medical setting and interpret. Yes, that's still VRI, but also the concept of what Beth is doing. I don't know if she's at home or if she's at a different office or something, but for me, I'm stationed at home. I can work from home all day, like yesterday, an 8 to 5 job sitting in my space, interpreting just like this. I don't have to leave my house. I could wear pajama bottoms and nobody would know. Like, VRI has definitely changed my world because before I was like, nope, not doing it, not a supporter of that. But I feel like the way that VRI has come to be during COVID has definitely shifted. But I do want to emphasize, I strongly do think that an in-person interpreter should be there if they can, and then VRI second. That is my own personal feeling, but take that into consideration. I don't know what South Dakota looks like versus Minnesota. At least last year, we were in full shutdown mode. The office and agency that I work with, we are all still working from home. Nobody is in our office. Our referral staff of people who schedule interpreters still working from home. So knowing kind of what you may be up against during your internship. 2020 was a tough year for a lot of seniors. It was a lot of VRI or online interpreting, on screen interpreting, and may not have a lot of opportunities. So I would definitely be open-minded in that sense. Another thing that I love about VRI is sometimes you can have 2 different Zoom meetings open on 2 separate computers, and you're like the invisible interpreter voicing for this deaf person. And it's just like, oh, look, Tanya's just using English all the way. Great. I don't even see an interpreter here. My screen is off here and I see the deaf consumer on another screen and we're working together here and like behind the scenes. That's definitely opened my eyes of seeing how are their colleagues viewing this deaf person without seeing me. It's been a huge change. So definitely be open-minded of what VRI has come. Obviously the term may change, on-screen interpreter, whatever you may want to call it, but I personally feel like it's come a long way in what it used to be. Tanya, do you want to share your perspective on that at all? Chris, Joelle. Christopher?
So my thought is because like we're maybe so against it, might be because we right now associate Zoom and VRI with COVID and like shutting down. And so I don't know, my personal experience is when we all went online in 2020, March of 2020, I hated it. I hated sitting here watching, like my eyes hurt all damn day. I was not wanting to do it whatsoever. Now that we're seeing like, now that we went to the VRS centers and we're seeing the new technology instead of our, you know, crappy old computers, I probably am a little bit more intrigued by it. But I still think I have that perception of like, I sat here for 3 months learning and over Zoom that I want to get out. I don't want to sit in front of a computer all day again. But that's kind of just like my personal thought with it.
Yeah, Tanya? Yeah, definitely. The other thing that I know that we only have a few minutes here, but for VRI too, is many of you mentioned that you're interested in VRS. So just for example, something to consider for VRI. VRS interpreters, you might do a phone conference and call into Zoom and interpret a presentation. You don't have access to my PowerPoint like Beth does currently. So if Beth were to we called through VRS and called in, she wouldn't be able to see any of this information, would have no prep materials, would have no idea how many people are in the room unless somebody said, hey, there's 8 of us here, please identify your name first and then talk and set up those rules, versus with Beth joining via Zoom, VRI or on-screen interpreting. She now has that prep material to say, all right, here's the stuff they're talking about. I was able to send the PowerPoint ahead of time. She had a chance to review it. She was able to chat with Tanya quick and kind of get a brief history of like who's the presenter. You don't have any of that, or maybe very minimal of it through VRS. So knowing too of, I would go VRI all day because I can point and like, okay, PowerPoint C, it says this, or this is the picture. I can see it versus having no clue saying, think PowerPoint says this, not sure. Do mine look good? Great. Communication's happening. I don't get it, but something's happening. So it's nice for you as the interpreter to be able to use your resources more so on VRI than VRS. So something to consider and think about, and hopefully kind of open-minded, and definitely understand staying from home, working on screen, Zoom meetings. Completely hear you, Christopher. I hear you. And then lastly, 4 out of 5 of you also stated, which state you want to work in. 4 out of 5 of you have said they want to stay in South Dakota as an option. 1 of 5 of you are considering Missouri, Kansas state lines, Joelle. And then 2 out of 5 of you are considering career in Minnesota. Come this way. Sorry, Tanya, I'm stealing your interpreters. I will take them all. They'll be in good hands, I promise. So, and then finally, 3 out of 5 of you said, not sure. I mean, that could just be, where does the wind blow me to? Maybe I go to Florida and interpret at Disney World for a year. I've known people who've done that. I've interpreted on cruise ships. Best thing ever, 7 weeks in the ocean. I'll take it. So there's different opportunities out there that you can do. So definitely keep your mind open. If you're seasick, bring some Dramamine, or maybe don't interpret a cruise, but there's options. Students study abroad. Are you trilingual? And I studied Spanish for 6 years. Don't speak it anymore, but I studied abroad as a student. There's definitely interpreters that have gone and interpreted abroad with students as well. So just know that you have a lot of options. You're not just stuck in these options of settings. So that's one of many reasons why I love my job. Some tips for after graduation. Know state laws and regulations, interpreting agency values, make sure they align with yours. Know your skills and complete an assessment. Some agencies here in Minnesota, for example, if you're not certified, you have to complete our assessment for ASLIS to work with us. And then we determine which kind of level and skill you are at. Maybe you can go to one-on-one jobs, or you must have a certified interpreter with you, those kinds of things. VRS, I believe, does assessments as well before they hire you. So get those assessments in if you can. Participate in workshops and programs. Find a mentor. I've been interpreting for 6 years and I still mentor. I have a deaf mentor, a hearing mentor, several other mentors. I have mentors that I reach out to and colleagues that when I interpret business, I say, here's some things that happen, let's discuss and debrief. I have mentors where when I work in healthcare settings and debrief with them, how do I prepare? So you don't have to say, okay, here's my one hearing and deaf mentor. I have a language model mentor. I have different kind of groups of mentors in building those relationships. So definitely have a mentor. In Minnesota, we have a state grant that if you reside outside the 7-county metro, so Delaney, are you the one who said you're from Cottage Grove? Unfortunately, that's not outside the 7-county metro. So if you moved to like, I'm trying to think what south is even harder, but Rochester. If you move to Rochester, then you'd have free mentoring available. So things to consider if you want to move to Duluth, it'd be an option. And then volunteer and get involved. Like you said, I volunteer for MRID for their board. So by getting involved, you make those connections and networks, which is extremely beneficial. Now we have 3 minutes left, so I'm going to just kind of touch some things here. For the South Dakota state law, I got this information from Krista, so I would say she would be your best bet of person to know what you need to have in order to work in South Dakota. I have never worked there, but she let me know you have to be certified and register with the state. To work in any setting, it requires national certification. Education is 3.5 or higher, and then provisional certification is available as well. And that's the requirements for getting your provisional certification. She did let me know there are some potential changes or discussions and maybe a task force that's set up to talk about the 5 years here being changed to 3 and this be changing to 4, the EIPA, and then national certification. It sounds like they're also discussing recognizing the BEI as well. There's currently only 6 states that recognize the BEI, but it is becoming a more well-known test and one that interpreters and deaf consumers are trusting. So I have information there. Minnesota, welcome to our lovely state of Minnesota. We have not much of laws around where you work unless you're K-12. If you want to not be certified and work in healthcare settings, you can. However, I strongly encourage you not to. We still encourage interpreters to become certified. It's not required, but our agencies here that we have do interview and hire based on qualifications, so qualified versus certified, and determining whether you would be eligible for which assignments for which jobs. Know your skills. If somebody, maybe you graduate after a month and they say, hey, go to this mental health appointment, it's okay to say no. The CPC says you can say no. So don't feel like you're forced to do that. Think of kind of worst case scenario. What if I do interpret something wrong, or I'm not aware of these laws or the medical field and what they require. How much information do you have about it, and how can that impact the individuals that are involved and yourself? Do you want to be sued if you do something wrong? Probably not. So take that into consideration. And then you have to have a 4.0 or higher. If you have less than a 4.0, then you're mandated to mentor or work with a mentor. And then also, if you have RID or EIPA, you have to follow the CEU requirements. And then the provisional certification requirements are here as well. Kansas is you must be certified in the state and register with the state, and the state determines if you are qualified. Joelle, is that who, right? You're my Kansas girl? Okay. So this also includes if you're going to go there for an internship, you have to register with them. So certifications are required to work in any capacity, are these ones here. They no longer offer the class or the levels anymore. They have replaced it with the BEI. So they have a that kind of system set up there. And then educational settings 4.0 or higher, and or any of these certifications, you can work in education settings. And then your provisional registration, if you don't have certification or have any of these, you have to register with the state, and the state determines, or the executive director of the commission there determines if you're eligible to interpret. And Missouri is a fun one. Sorry, I'm not going over on time, so if you have to leave, definitely do. I think it's one of my last slides. Missouri is a fun one. Must be certified by the MIX, Missouri Interpreter Certification System. So you would file your certification information with Missouri. Depending on which certification you have, they have a color code system. This lovely guy here that you would follow and say, okay, they recently got rid of the novice, so that one no longer applies, and apprentice no longer applies. But depending on which certifications you hold will determine which color code you are and which jobs you can accept. So, for example, I have my just basic and IC. I'm considered advanced interpreter, so I would go to this here under advanced. It would tell me, here's all the jobs that I could do. And then kind of finding where you're at in that system. 2019, they no longer include the apprentice or novice certifications. Like I mentioned, basic, you can no longer interpret financial settings or financial activities. So that was an amendment they made in 2019. So there's not that updated color code yet that I found, but just be aware of that. And then interpreters who do not hold certification, this is your process of different options. If you want to only work in an educational, then you have to apply for the PCED certification. If you hold a 4.0 or higher in the elementary EIPA, you can apply for the mix RCED K-12. If you have 4.0 or higher in secondary, then it's RCED 712. And that would be the grades you could work in. And then they have the provisional certification, the AKA learner's permit. You have to pass the TEP, which is the written portion of the BEI test, and receive a non-passing score of the BEI basics. So that means you have to take your basic test and fail it, essentially, in order to be eligible for this one. And then I have some resources here. Again, I will email it. One thing I do want you all to do is write down the student code for any ASLES workshops if you don't have it already. You can sign up for 50% off. So that is available and an option for you as well. And then my contact information. So sorry that I rattled it off the states. I know that you guys all have to go, but I appreciate all of you joining in your time. I'm more than happy to stay for questions. I'm available to stay, but if anybody else has to head out, please do. Jaden?
I was thinking of taking the knowledge test sometime this spring. Do you think during internship would be a good time to do that, or should I wait till after I graduate? What do you think a good timeline for that would be?
For your knowledge. I think if you're gonna take it this spring, I think during your internship or after graduation would be a good time, because I would start to think of questions when you're working and observing interpreters of why did you make that decision, more so than how did you sign that. Yeah, you're always going to be building that vocab, but to change and shift your mindset of not only did you sign it this way, but why did you decide to open the door for the deaf consumer? What prompted you to do that? Or why did you decide to introduce yourself as the interpreter instead of allowing the deaf consumer to take lead in the situation? And it's not to criticize the interpreter's decisions, so definitely make sure that it's phrased that way, but just I'm here to learn of what is that process, because I might hold the door open for a consumer and maybe I might not, because why though? What was my reason as to why not? So being able to think of it in that sense, which I'm pretty sure you all are discussing demand control schema, which is lovely, but it definitely does come into play in real life interpreting. So definitely keep working on it and ask those questions to the interpreters you're observing, because that's really what our role is as interpreters as well, not just the language piece in building that vocab. It's why did I choose to sign it that way? I probably chose to sign it that way because it's the only sign I know. But if I had other options to think of, I could have done it 1,500 other ways. So thinking more outside the box instead of getting stuck on the vocab. I'm guilty. I did that. Any other questions? Yeah. No? Okay. You should all have my contact information, so feel free to reach out to me at any point in time, text, call, or email. So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.